Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher in Los Angeles, trying to bring viewpoint diversity to the mainstream and make nuance a thing again. And my guest today is a comedian, podcaster, and writer that developed his perspectives on various issues in real time in a very public way. He's a very public figure, and then developed his thinking. And it's something that I'm constantly trying to do in the classroom and with my podcast and social media and stuff. So I thought it'd be really valuable to bring him in and kind of hear about how one goes about doing that. About 2 years ago, I had Brittany Talissa King on my podcast, who was a former Black Lives Matter organizer who then became heterodox, and kind of walked through her process. And I thought that was really interesting. So more of these I can get, the better. So Jamie, thank you so much, man. It's really cool to meet you, just like through like the interwebs. And then I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man. I thanks for having me. I forgot it was a video and I'm regretting wearing this shirt. Yeah, I felt the same way when I saw you. It is wild to me that the word, like, that nuance is edgy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, my whole comedy career back in the day, I was always called like edgy, but it was because I was doing things that I considered edgy. I was talking about the war after 9/11. I talked about like drone strikes under Obama on Conan, which got a lot of blowback.
Wow.
Which, by the way, like, that ties into what you do, which is, it's not that I had a principle. I had an anti-war principle. And so if George Bush does something, I like Obama as a dude. I'd rather hang out with that guy. I don't want to play basketball with George Bush. But I was just like, well, man, you're kind of doing some of the same stuff. So, I don't want to like spend this interview patting ourselves on the back, because I think we've probably encountered more frustration than we have like rewards. Like, it's not rewarding to our career to be in the middle, because I think a lot of people secretly are in the middle, but also it just pisses off people on both sides. And what sells nowadays, I believe there's going to be a blowback, but what sells nowadays is, I am extreme on the right, therefore I yell at everything the left says, or I am extreme on the left, therefore I yell at everything the right says. When in reality, it's like, people don't really think like that, but I think are afraid to be nuanced. So the idea that nuance and balance and conversation and being nice to your neighbors, I mean, basic Jesus stuff, right, is edgy and controversial in the slightest, is horrifying. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes from, well, I guess I want to hear about like how did you kind of develop, because your thinking process, because you were taking hard stances against like the war and stuff like that, which is something that, I've seen now with like the Ukraine and stuff like, and things along those lines, is people who were very anti-war and now all of a sudden saying, let's, give everything to Ukraine. Let's, let's basically poke this giant Russian bear that's the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then also, because I agree with you, but then also reverse that about all the people who are, were pro Iraq and pro Afghanistan, and them rightfully being against the war in Ukraine. And again, so much of it has to be teams. I think with war too, I mean, actually with war, just like with a lot of social issues, it's also, if you criticize the war, you're against the troops. If you criticize kids taking hormone pills, you hate trans people. And it's like, guys, you can do all of these things. You can say, hey, I don't think we should be messing with kids' bodies. Also, I'm not going to bully a trans person. You can say, hey, me being against the war in Iraq is as pro-troop a stance as you can possibly take, because I don't want them to get hurt or killed or lose men over a cause that isn't just, because we're not in danger, and we should be fighting wars that actually keep us safer and not put us in more danger. And so that's the ironic thing about all this stuff, right? Is if people were just more open with their feelings and hesitations, but especially on the left, it's like the second you divert at all, you're just like, you're kicked out of the cool kids club or whatever.
Yeah, and I get pushback, as I'm sure you do, from like kind of the left and the right when I go against their ideology. Ideologies,
It's
I understand
horrible.
them. You
Yeah.
know, it's like a heuristic. It's like a quicker way. The world is so complex. It's so confusing. And I
Yeah.
need some sort of like grounding what to believe in. So people
Yeah.
subscribe to these ideologies, but there's by definition, it's like a map. It's not the real thing. It's too simplistic. So I love the nuance of like, well, here's where your map is maybe a little bit wrong. And then people get mad at me. But
Right.
how do you like break people out of that? I have students who come into my class and they know what they know, and then they leave and they're like, I knew so much more when I was ignorant. That Dunning-Kruger effect thing,
Oh, right.
where like
I know.
they just want to know this stance on guns or abortion is what it is, and then I add
How do
all
I?
this nuance
Yeah.
to it.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't know what the stance is, but here's all the angles of it, and then they're
Well,
really confused.
And bro, that's why, before my sort of life imploded, like when I was super lefty culture warrior guy, it was easier because
Yeah, can you go into that a little bit for me, Jamie?
sure.
Because I don't know if everyone knows like your story or has followed
No,
it.
yeah. And usually I forget whose podcast I was on the other day. It might have been a right wing one. It might have been Glenn Beck's show where I said, like, my introductions back in the day when I was just a comedian used to be like, you've seen this next guy on Conan, the very funny Jamie Kilstein. He plays clubs all over the country or whatever. And now my intros are like, oh, this next guy's been through it. It's surprising he's alive. Please welcome the very fragile Jamie Kilstein. So I used to be this like super lefty dude. And right now I'm calling myself a bleeding heart centrist. That's just the term I like. I've landed on that. And I'll circle back to kind of all my crap, but like, can you curse on the show, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, just because you're like a high school teacher. I've been trying to, but like crap just sounds so silly. I'll circle back to my shitbag of a life. So like it was easier because I remember, and I talked about this on Rogan, I remember I could just, everyone's outraged about something on Twitter. I would go to the trending topics, see what it is. I would see what my people, so my side sees. I never followed any conservatives. And then I would just be like, all right, well, I can come up with a funnier way to phrase it than Chris Hayes did or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I would phrase it my way. Again, I wouldn't investigate, even though what attracted me to the left was compassion, empathy, sticking up for the downtrodden, all that stuff. But like, I wasn't really showing that. I wasn't purposefully not doing that. I wasn't like, oh, this is going to get me laid. But I was definitely like, how do I get my tweet? I thought my tweet would do good in the world, even though in real life I wasn't doing much. And then I would just kind of refresh it. I wouldn't refresh the story to like see how the family of the victim of the black child who was shot by the cops, I would refresh to see if I was getting, because it gets addicting, if I was getting retweets and like, oh shit, this celebrity started following me, cool. And it kind of just became about that, but it wasn't nuanced conversations. It was just reframing, how my side told me I felt. And that was like 15 years ago. So it's only gotten worse. The echo chambers have only gotten worse. The slight points of view that can get you kicked out of your tribes have only gotten like slighter. And so, look, I became politically aware under George Bush. And all I knew was that my favorite comedians were George Carlin and Bill Hicks. My favorite band was Tool and Bad Religion. Not exactly establishment artists. And what I saw, not knowing a lot, and I still don't disagree with this, is I saw the biggest things under the Bush administration were, it was the war, it was domestic wiretapping, it was gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married. And I was like, got it. I'm a liberal. Like, I don't like any of this. But with that said, I was also on the side of the left that like, I didn't like Gore, just like I didn't like Clinton. I was a fucking Nader guy. And in the very beginning of my podcast, it was really that I did with my ex-wife. It was very liberal, but it was edgy, like, because it was comedy first, right? Okay. So like I could call Dick Cheney like a fat R word, and everyone would be like, yeah, fuck yeah. Whereas like now it would get me canceled, right? Um, and then sort of like as my career was like plateauing, we got more political fans than we did comedy fans, and suddenly we were like kind of like pulling back our language, and essentially we were on the forefront of like canceling people. That's just what our tribe on the internet did.
Yeah.
I've been on Rogan's 3 times, and much like a TV show, I don't recommend the second season. Which is like the first season was great. It was at his house. We talked about
Yeah.
the war and the war on drugs, and he loved me, and I got a bunch of fans, and he called me powerful. And then the second one was when I was in this phase and I did not know we were going to argue, and I would not recommend getting high. I'm not even a weed smoker, but I was just like, hey, when in Rome, like I'm on Rogan's. And
Yeah.
then like cut to me being yelled at that like rape culture isn't a thing, and I'm stoned and my phone's blowing up, and I'm like, cool, my life's over. Then I get sort of labeled this like male feminist dude. I think the term back then, I think the term male feminist is creepy. That sounds like I'm trying to like kidnap women on like the Sarah Lawrence campus with like promises of Tegan and Sarah tickets. I don't like it. I think that like you should believe in equality for everybody. I still consider myself that. I still see the problems that women face that men don't have to worry about when it comes to self-defense, protecting themselves. Like there's plenty of things. But I get labeled this male feminist. All the Rogan guys already hated me after that Rogan appearance. Like one of his people, like my Twitter got hacked. They just wrote like rape all over it. So because I was like, rape culture is bad, I wouldn't make rape jokes. And again, I said it in my 20s stone self-righteous way, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah.
But I just became like the rape guy because I was like, rape's bad. I don't make rape jokes. I still don't make rape jokes. And so, but I was in a floundering marriage. I had an affair. I regret the affair. The affair was very bad. I shouldn't have done it. I have friends. I have famous female friends that are like, well, why don't you just say this publicly? Like there are reasons that no one will ever know. And that's okay because I take ownership for it. But it became one of those funny hypocrisy stories because I was labeled this self-righteous male feminist. I go to have an affair, and because I'm in that liberal world, a consensual 2-year affair was called sexual misconduct. Like it became like a Me Too story. Which sucks, man. And I remember like Rogan had me back on because I disappeared for a year. I was suicidal, all that stuff. And Rogan had me back on, and he always defends me when my name comes up, and it's like really sweet. And he had me back on to kind of like help me and defend me, and it was his idea. And I remember, I mean, maybe this was still the old feminist in me, but like this is the path that most people take. This is why I was so attracted to you, to your Instagram and what you're trying to do. It would be really funny if you didn't know any of that stuff about me and you're like, please don't say you like me. I have to end this interview. But because I had a path, and so Rogan brings me back on, and there was a moment where he goes, isn't it worse? Maybe he didn't say worse, but like, isn't it about the same or whatever to be falsely accused of something? Then, isn't it just as bad? And I was like, no, like it's not. Like there are still so many women who do not get justice for their sexual assault, for abusive boyfriends, for all this stuff. But what I will say is when you start to conflate affairs with Harvey Weinstein, when you start to conflate flirting with predatory behavior, all this stuff, it is bad for guys, but it's really bad for women. And there's a reason that the majority of my circle in every world I'm in, jujitsu, comedy, my podcast, it's like mainly women who listen to me. And the women who have been the most vocal supporting me, a lot of them have been like assaulted or have been in abusive relationships. And, I think we saw it with the Aziz Ansari, which even with Aziz, like I wouldn't have done what he did, but that was the story where people started to take everything less seriously. And they were like, oh, we're calling this rape. Okay. And that makes it worse for women because it sort of lowers the bar. So my opportunity, and what I think a lot of people assume, maybe, and the word grifter gets tossed around a lot to people who have nuanced opinions or have changed their mind. That was my opportunity to do a right-wing heel turn if I wanted to, because I lost everything. I lost all my friends, my fans, my wife, my money, all the things, everything. In a day, I lost everything. And
because of that interview.
No, because when the affair came out.
Oh, okay. And how close was that to the interview that was like very public? Because Joe Rogan has this gigantic platform.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
been pretty big for a while. So like,
so the second, I don't know. I feel like it was like 3 years after the it was like a year or two that I went back on Rogan, that I had the good third act after the affair came out. But it was probably like probably a couple years after the bad one that the affair happened. And when I lost everything, like that's when right-wing people wanted to talk to me. Which I also think, by the way, on the right, even though I don't even know if I'm more conservative than I am liberal, but this is disingenuous of the right, where it's just like, oh, this guy was accused of doing bad things to women. I guess he's on our team. It's like, well, you don't want that. You don't want that at all, you know? And like, I even got I remember my cat was covered in fleas, which was like my breaking point, because he was like all I had. And I got like a publishing company wanted me to write like a book. And I said this on I think Tim Pool's show, that if I wrote a book called like From Feminist to Freedom Fighter, and it was me holding like a red pill, $1 billion, I would have my own show on fucking Fox News. I'd be killing it. And I didn't, man. And I still considered myself liberal, which broke my heart, because I didn't want to read any of these liberal things. I feel accepted. There were times, man, where I would see stories about, like, I haven't really talked about it this way, but like a girl being assaulted. And I was like, well, if I say something publicly and try to defend her, someone will be like, well, you're a creep, so why are you saying something? Which is like horrible, right? Because it's also like antithetical to who I am. Like, I was an idiot in my 20s, then I should have gotten out of a relationship, and I didn't, and I had this stupid affair, and I thought I was in love, and all this stuff. That is very different. You know, I'm very proud of the way I treat women. I'm very proud of even how my last couple of relationships ended. I'm proud of it. So to have public people say like the opposite of you, by the way, who don't actually care. Like one of the dudes who always posts my article around has charges pressed against him by women. Like it's like the internet's so disingenuous. So that's my sad fucking story. If people are still listening, what actually made me start to change my mind was, you know, I guess the cancel or affair has been like 8 years now, 10 years, and I'm doing fine. I moved to Texas. My stand-up career is going better than it's ever gone. I'm opening for Duncan Trussell. I'm doing all this cool stuff. And I just make conservative friends. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Like, I feel like I should have gone into my story, but like the answer to your question is I made conservative friends, and I had who, by the way, I didn't like know it. Like, I didn't seek them out. It's just, I'm in Texas. I'm around fighters, and you know, when I needed a place to stay, this dude put me up at his apartment because him and his kids were gone. And like, I was like, oh, that guy's a conservative. And one of my mentors, I find out, is like Christian. And I was like, oh, but I thought Christians were just like homophobic. And you're just like a really nice guy I've looked up to for a long time. And then I start working with Tim Kennedy and those guys. And, you know, I watch the way they interact with liberals, conservatives, their children, wives, friends. And I go, oh, I just want to, this is the kind of man I want to be. Fuck politics. This is the kind of man I want to be. So then that leads you, the next obvious step is to go, well, if I respect these people more than the people I used to hang out with, maybe I should ask them questions instead of just being like, well, this guy's really cool to like his wife and everybody I see, and he lives a purposeful life, but like, if he's pro-life, I can't be friends with him. Or if he's pro-gun, I can't be friends with him. I would just, from an empathetic point of view, ask questions. I would ask questions with the baseline being like, I respect you as a man. So like, even if we're going to disagree here, we're cool. And a lot of times I would learn stuff that I never fucking heard in my echo chamber. And I go, well, this changes things a little bit. And by the way, I still have a ton of liberal friends because I'm still in the arts. I'm still in comedy. So it's not even like I want to fit in with my new friends, because then, by the way, I'll go back sometimes and ask like a liberal friend or ask a trans person what they think about, trans people competing in sports and shit like that. Like, I'll just ask questions to people I like. But all that bullshit and stuff I went through, it definitely forced me out of my echo chamber. But I will never be the person who, oh, these people don't like me anymore, so like I'm gonna change my mind, because I'm a fucking idiot when it comes to business. I never did that, or else I wouldn't have done my Conan set about Obama. I wouldn't have stopped talking about politics under Trump. There's something in me where I can't fake it. You know what I mean? And so I wouldn't have been able to fake. I remember there was a moment, again, with the cat with the fleas, where I get this book deal talk and I go, maybe I am conservative. And I was like, okay, well, who's like a conservative people like? And I remember going to YouTube and being like, Ben Shapiro. I've heard he's a smart fella. And I lasted like 20 seconds. And I'm like, I am not, no, I'm not that. But now you get people like, Jocko and Jordan Peter and all these people who I have learned from, and Tim Kennedy, who went on my podcast. He has over 1 million followers. I assume all of them are conservative. Goes on my podcast and says, if I ever heard someone at church saying something bad about a gay person, me and them are having words. That's not going to make Tim popular. That's the kind of man he is. So anyway, tirade done. Do what you will with that.
No, so I'm trying to blaze a pathway is what I'm trying to do, Jamie. Like, what got you? So a couple of things stand out. One is
rock bottom helped.
That's what I was going to say. One is you have to kind of lose the pain of changing. That's like the thing for addicts, right? Like the pain of getting sober has to be less than the pain of staying an addict. So something you almost have to get to that place where you have less to lose in making a change. Like if I stay on this pathway, it's going to keep driving me down. So something's got to give. And that opens your eyes up to what could it possibly be as far as the changes that I need to adopt.
And just off that really, really quick, it's what you don't want to do is, again, actually be a grifter, right? If I suddenly was like, I'm a feminist dude, I get caught cheating, and I'm just like, fuck feminists. While that might have worked, it is not disingenuous. What the rock bottom has to do, it doesn't just shift your team. And we see that all the time. And
Dave Rubin, I think, is a great example of that.
Yeah.
And nothing against Dave Rubin.
No,
I've had interactions with him that were positive.
Me too. But like, you just go, I think I was the first show where he just goes, yeah, you know what? I'm just conservative. Because it's one thing to go, when you go like, the left is driving me away from the left. I am still liberal, but then every single one of your policies is conservative. You just go, okay, that just can't be your stick anymore. You're just a conservative. You're still a smart dude, but you're a conservative now. So just say you're a conservative now. There are a bunch of people who in the middle who kind of play that game. And for me, I'm just like, I don't fucking know. I just want to be around good people trying to help other people. That's it. But so to your point, it has to be, the rock bottom has to trigger you to change as a person, not change your team. So it wasn't suddenly that I was conservative. It was, I realized that, one of the things that got me in trouble was I was, relationship stuff. I was codependent. I was, all this stuff. But when it comes to this conversation in politics, and I think Rogan might have even said this, Rogan or Stanhope said this, where it's like, it wasn't even the affair that got me in trouble. Comedians talk about affairs all the time. Richard Pryor got very famous talking about being like abusive and all this stuff. It was the self-righteousness that got me in trouble. And so on top of fixing the way I am in relationships, that was the biggest thing. So because I had spent 8 years working on just being more open-minded, by the way, still with no conservative friends, that sort of planted these seeds so that when I did come here, that rock bottom did facilitate my open-mindedness, but not, like I said, you don't want to just, if you get sober from alcohol, you don't go to crack, right? Like if I did do that right-wing switch, I would have been the same self-righteous version of me, just on the right or in the center. You can do it in the center too, where you're like, this is my shtick, so I have to find something to shit on the left and something to shit on the right. It should never be a shtick. It should always be about, I am growing as a person. And if you decide to publicly let people in on that because you think it'll help, cool. But man, it is hard.
Yeah, I mean, you leaned into curiosity. I developed, like, I've been doing this for 5 years or so, like in a public way, which is really weird for me. Like talking into my phone, like I feel like a douchebag, and I did from the beginning. But as soon as I framed it as like, it's my classroom, because I'll be a dancing monkey to get kids to pay attention. Like I'll make a fool out of myself.
Dude, I teach kids jujitsu. Same.
Yeah. So leaning into curiosity, I developed these like 3 like pillars that I talk about a lot, which is intellectual humility, genuine curiosity, and grace. And I think that when you go out and you have that element, like I do like shit on the left and the right, but it's always from like, if you take a controversial stance, abortion, guns, whatever, it's like, what's my stance on that? It doesn't fit a binary really. It's like, like I believe that, you know, maybe like I'm still developing this, but like I believe that like abortions are not the ideal. Yep. So by definition, that would be like missing the mark or a sin or something like that. But I also think that it's really horrible how these, you know, women don't have anywhere to turn. We need to provide them with more things. Like it's so complex. So how can you be so certain and go hard, even like the switcheroo? Like if you would go from left to right, it doesn't make sense to the way that my mind works. It doesn't sound like the way that your mind works too.
Well, I want to say it's so complex, but it's so, what you just said is so simple. It's like, if we care about people, then yeah, I used to probably make jokes about like, yeah, fuck it, abort a baby as it's coming out. And like, yeah, now that I've like learned for the first time stuff about that, I go, oh man. Cause I always just thought it was like a glob of cells versus a woman. And I go, all right, idiots, if you're pro-life, isn't a woman that? But now it's like, yeah, man, I don't think it's too controversial of a stance to be like, not ideal. But also, we want to make sure that, you know, kids who are raped have somewhere to turn. That, and you know, by the way, following people who are pro-life for the first time, you do hear stories about like really beautiful stories that come out of these tragedies where kids are born. But yeah, it's complicated, but it's simple in the sense that, well, what is being kind to everybody look like, right? And I mean, I think it's so cool. And I got to tell you too, like when I first saw your Instagram, because I've been through so much, I really have to catch myself when I'm being like bitter, right? Like I think I caught myself being bitter, and I guess I'm going to say it again, but it's fine. On Jim Norton and Sam Roberts' Sirius XM show, where it was like right when like John Mulaney, who I love and has been nothing but, he got me my first manager. He's so successful. He's so funny. But he was like hosting SNL that week or something. And he did a cooler version of what I did. He cheated on his wife. His wife handled it much worse. Like she like had to go to like into like a recovery. Cheated on his wife, had an affair with Olivia Munn during a coke relapse. And then he was like brought on to Seth Meyers, applauded for being a dad, and then he got to host SNL, and now he plays, you know, whatever arenas. And at my best, I go, well, I don't want the same thing that happened to me to happen to other people. And then at my worst, I go, well, fucking, he did the same thing I did, but he got to fuck Olivia Munn and do cocaine, which I've done neither of those things. Like, this sucks, dude. And I start to get bitter. And I remember when I first saw your Instagram, that same part of my brain just goes, oh, fuck this guy. He's like a better looking teacher version of me without an affair. And he's gonna, you know what I mean? And then I actually watched your stuff, and it was so genuine and authentic that I was just like, nope. That, because a lot of times we like repel things that we should be doing the opposite with. And I was just like, no, this guy is actually doing exactly. I've talked so much shit about why aren't people trying to do what I'm trying to do, and then here's someone who's doing it. And so just so you know, like, even though Yeah, I'm sure you do feel douchey. I never bought a selfie stick. If anyone's around, I can't. Like, I have the
I
same
know.
insecurities.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is like so important. I got excited. My friend Tulsi Gabbard, I saw reposted something you did, and I go, oh, cool. All right, maybe he's gonna blow up. And I found myself like very much rooting for you.
Oh,
So
thank you,
yeah,
man.
I think it's great.
Tulsi's been amazing. The only political rally I ever went to was hers, and
She's the best.
she was really supportive of like what I was doing and stuff. She's amazing.
Yeah, she rules.
The like you started asking instead of like you I guess used to ask rhetorical questions, and then
Sure.
you started asking real questions. The
Yeah,
rhetorical question
yeah.
would be like, how could you ever, you know, take a stance of a cluster of cells over a woman? And then it turns into a real question. That's something I advise all the time, is like, you are curious. How could someone possibly vote for Trump? Or how could someone possibly still support Biden even though he looks like he's dead? It's like, those are valid questions.
Yeah.
Turn them into actual questions.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, so then you're looking for an answer, not just to because if you're in the rhetorical, you're not actually trying to learn. But
by the
the
way,
goal here is try and learn.
There are going to be people projecting and listening to this and being like, well, you can't talk to them, whether it's a Trump person or a Biden person. And it's like, bro, you don't even need to change the wording of the question.
Yeah.
You can literally just change your tone and be like, hey, man, politics is like really fucked right now. Like, can I ask, like, what pushed you to vote for Trump? And they're going to be like, yeah, man, I don't even like, I did it. And like, I didn't think he could win, but like, Hillary is just so establishment and it's been broken for so long. And then you get to go, hey, man, I'm a Democrat. I agree with you. Like, the Clintons are completely fucked and establishment. He's like, okay, see what I mean? And, you know, like, when I heard, because I was probably in the, if you voted for Trump, you were a racist. I think I was still more, I was way more liberal then. Oh, man, was I still with my ex? Anyway, it was a long time ago.
I know 2016 is a long time ago now.
It's a long
which is
time.
Crazy.
I know. But then you
7
hear
years.
that statistic that the statistic where a lot of the areas that voted for Obama voted for Trump. And that makes so much sense because remember, one, Obama was running against Hillary and we need to stop running Clintons forever. But two, it's like his whole platform was change.
Yeah.
That was it, which was Trump's whole platform. Obama was anti-establishment. So it totally makes sense. I mean, when he was a junior senator, the speech he gave at the DNC, and I must have been like a baby. I must have been like 21 or 20, whatever. I was young. I remember going, that guy's going to be president. And by the way, his platform was our platform. It was bringing together red states and blue states and gay kids. And, you know, it was, we're not as divided as we think we are. And then he won and then he became establishment. And you go, well, that's the fucking system. But like a lot of people just saw the establishment. They were rebelling against the establishment, not like Black communities. And, you know, I've become friends with a lot of Black conservatives and I don't want to treat them like a fucking science project. You know, like Coleman Hughes is a really good friend of mine. And, but man, do I ask them questions because and suddenly you go, oh, well, this makes much more sense than you being a Black white supremacist. It makes much more sense that you love and care about these Black communities. This is the path you believe will empower them the most.
Yeah.
Where it's like, that's way different than, oh, fucking Uncle Tom, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, 2016 also, I mean, what the DNC did to Bernie, and that's a lot of people were on the Bernie camp. I mean, I donated to the Bernie campaign.
I was on the Bernie camp. I did a fucking fundraiser with members of the band Fish in Brooklyn for Bernie Sanders.
That's awesome.
It was awesome.
But then the way he was treated, it's just like, what's interesting now, because you call yourself like a former like SJW, like social justice warrior, is the interesting thing is you're also like kind of like a punk rock guy. You're an anti-establishment guy, but now the social justice warriors, they have taken over institutions, at least to some degree. I mean, I'm in education, and the colleges of education, a lot of the academies and universities and stuff like that are very dominated by those politics. Obviously, we see with the Twitter files and everything, all of like big tech, you know, like
Jocko just posted a video this morning about being shadow banned, and Jocko is like so in the middle. And I mean, I'm sure you can tell he leans to the right, but like, he's just so nuanced and thoughtful and has done so much good for, and by the way, I'm not even talking about like his service. I'm talking about like good for like young men who listen to that. And
Oh,
dude,
we read his books in my house. Like Mikey and the Dragons is like almost a nightly read. My kids memorize.
oh, that's one of the
so
reasons
good.
I cannot wait to be a parent so I can buy those children's books, because I'm like, I would read them for me.
They're amazing.
He's the best. And yeah, he's shadow banned. And dude, you're right. Like, I never thought about it that way, where it's like education, social media, all these platforms. I'm just so used to being like, the left's the underdog, the left's the underdog, the left's the underdog. It's just like rich white bullies who are on the right. And yeah. Yeah, I mean, the left is the establishment in so many ways. You know, I'm wondering your thought on this. Do you think that, so let's take the drag shows, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I go on a big right-wing show, I make sure to be like, hey, trans people are people and we should not bully them. And even if you think they're mentally ill or whatever, then that means you should show compassion to someone who is struggling, right? The idea of them walking out into the world the way that they are, knowing that people have the perceptions, all that, like, it's got to be a fucking bummer, right? It's got to be hard.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I don't think kids should go to fucking drag shows. I don't think kids should get hormone blockers. And I don't think someone who was born a male should be fighting like MMA, right? These, to me, seem pretty logical. You don't hear people saying both of those things. I'm sure you would agree with both of those things. But what's interesting, and I want to talk about this on stage, because I've started opening for like JP Sears and Adam Carolla, and I know, you know, they've all talked about the trans issue. And but you know, on the other hand, I'm watching, because the left is like, all right, I guess we're pro kids going to drag shows. That enables the right to go, well, gay people and trans people are groomers. And my belief is that the majority of gay people do not want to fuck your kid. They just want to watch, you know, The Last of Us in their cul-de-sac, you know, whatever, and get to bed by 9. And but the left is not, the left is fucking themselves more. I am convinced that the majority of people who stick up for these drag shows, they're not groomers. They don't want to sexualize kids. I think they're fucking idiots and they just want to fit in and look cool and do their LA thing and act progressive and virtue signal, which is never a word I thought I would use earnestly. And because of that, it does make it look to the right like all these people are sexualizing your children and whatever. And I actually think straight liberals are making it, or we're trying to be allies, are making it far worse, because there are kind right-wing people. And again, you know, I'm straight and cis or whatever, but people who I've witnessed be kind, who their Twitter feed all day is just kids at drag shows, a trans teacher, all this stuff. And yeah, man, according to their Twitter feed, it does look like, you know, grooming, but I don't think it is. I literally think the majority of it is just liberals being dumb.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of cowardice on the left. I think that's like a small minority that'll talk out about this stuff, you know, stuff that can get like really like iffy, like borderlines, you know, whatever, pedophilia or whatever.
Yes.
But then they're so scared because it's a marginalized community. So you go, oh, well, I don't want to criticize these people who have a high suicide rate and everything like that. So just let them be. It's like in the classroom, like there's these kids who have like whatever, all kinds of issues. It's like, just let them throw this tantrum. It's like, no, you got to give them some guidance. That's not treating them as equals. Like, right. Eric Weinstein's quote of like, if I can't criticize you, you're not my equal. I love that. It's like, that's a really good one. Like you have to, I've had 9 or 10 trans people on my podcast. I've had like MAGA hat wearing people who were there, trans people who were there on January 6th. I've had here's where it gets nuanced too, Jamie, is like the situation where where like conservatives will say, use the bathroom that you were, you know, of your biological gender. But I had Buck Angel and Xander Keg on my podcast, like dudes who are bald with a big beard and furry chests. If you have a daughter and that human walks into the ladies' room, it's like, what is going on? It's going to be like disruptive because it looks like man. But then if someone like Blair White walks in, it's like, oh, well, just walks to the stall. So
if Blair White walks in, I'm like, who's that hot chick who just came into my...
Yeah, but then, Blair White walks into the men's room. It's going to like, is that going to be safe for someone like her? Like,
Yeah.
probably not.
Right.
Like, so
And that's so interesting because I never
complex.
thought of people, because my old progressive, like the bathroom thing, I was still pretty like, everyone just grow up. But the Buck Angel point's a really good one. Because, you know, something that the right didn't talk about back then was like the majority of sex crimes or assaults or whatever in public bathrooms were dudes. It was like straight dudes.
You were taking
So
advantage of the
no,
policy, I guess,
just
right?
forever. Like before we even knew what
Oh.
trans people were. It was just
Oh, yeah.
like, if you're gonna be a fucking creepy guy, you can just walk into the bathroom and be a creepy guy. And
Yeah.
so the way on the left I looked at the bathroom bill was, I'm like, okay, so you're gonna punish a Blair White, right? Some who just wants to go in and like pee innocently, when the majority of predators are like straight dude. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I again, it makes it more complicated. I know it's, yeah, it makes it more complicated, but I really think that we may not come up with a ton of answers on this podcast. But what's so interesting to me is, I can't believe it took 44 minutes for me to bring up Jesus, but here we go. What was really interesting for me is, so I've had such huge problems with organized religion because I always just thought organized religion was, we're going to scare people and we're going to ostracize people and we're going to shame people, which, by the way, a lot of it is. But when I just started being like, I just want to follow Jesus, I just want to read about Jesus, suddenly you go, oh, okay, this makes more sense, right? Like Jesus didn't like organized religion. He was like, what are you guys doing? And so I've been there's this author I really like named John Mark Comer. He's a pastor, and I'm reading one of his books on sexuality, which is like the most controversial topic in religion. And it's so interesting because even my pastor here in Austin, they talked about sex this month, and he goes, look, I'm not trying to, he said this on stage. He's like, I'm not trying to sound like an 80s youth pastor. I'm not telling you, you know, wait till marriage to have sex because you're going to go to hell or you're going to be judged. He had sex before marriage. Most people, I'm sure, sitting there did. He's like, I'm just telling you, if something isn't working, try something different. This is how I, you know, it was laid out. He had this really brilliant line where he's like, if you know, because I started thinking about my relationships where we'd sleep together on the first date, and now suddenly it's just all about sex. So you're missing out on building this friendship. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. But so all the pastors I love are really just like, you had an abortion, we're gonna talk to you about it and be compassionate and guide you instead of kick you out of the church, right? We're gonna help you heal. You used the word grace before as one of your principles. If it shows you the kind of people I was hanging out with when I was on the social justice whatever side, I had never heard the word grace until I started going to church this year, and I had to ask my pastor what it meant. Like, I read the definition, I Googled it, but then I was like, hey, can you actually explain to me? Like, I get forgiveness, I get love. I'm like, what the fuck is, I know. And I'm like, what is grace? And actually Tim Kennedy used that word on the podcast too. And I was like, I gotta look that up. Which is insane.
You got to go back though. How do you go from, because yeah, I have my own journey that was basically like maybe similar to like C.S. Lewis or something, where I was like, I'm gonna prove this wrong. I'm gonna prove that this is nonsense. And
it's so funny. I didn't know that.
Failed. But how do you go from like, you know, this is a lot of just judgment, this is not good, my experiences with people who are Christian and bad, to like, let me follow Jesus? That's a big leap.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I mean, it was the same sort of, it was the same, just being open to it, right? Like, slash psilocybin. But no, it was
okay. Well, hold on. I wrote down in my notes, I wrote Christianity, sexual religion, something I wanted to talk about, and then I wrote psychedelics with a question mark.
Oh, great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'll tie it all. Well, real quick, just to end the John Mark Comer thing.
Okay.
This guy is so compassionate. You just hear it. You hear his voice. He sounds like an effeminate vegan from Portland, because he kind of is all those things. And then you hear him talk about, you know, gender or about sex, and you go, oh, well, this sounds kind of conservative-y. And then you hear him talk about racial justice and helping poor people, and you go, oh, this sounds like all my Nader friends. And then you go, right, because following Jesus also means you're kind of in the middle, at least in our political world. You know what I mean? Where there are going to be some things that piss off conservatives, there are going to be some things that piss off liberals. And so that I just found that was a real wake up moment for me when I felt alone, and I was kind of like, oh no, cool, it's me, Will, and Jesus. That's great. That's a good. I'll take that. Okay, so once again, I'm going to try to make it relatable to your audience. I kind of got shoehorned into the atheist world because I was speaking up against, again, like homophobia and stuff like that in the church under George Bush. That's when I started to become well known. So all these big, and my wife was an atheist, and I always called myself an agnostic, but I also, like, I dropped out of high school, so I have a lot of insecurity about being dumb. And so
Yeah, me
suddenly,
too, by the way. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That actually makes me
In
feel
like intellectual circles, like I am not equipped. But what that does, it allows me to just lean into curiosity. I've had conversations with Eric Weinstein. He's like, he was giving me compliments about my intelligence. I was like, no, what you don't understand is I'm like a first principles thinker. I'm a very simplistic thinker.
Yeah.
So I listen to all this complex stuff. I have to dumb it down for me. But then because I dumb it down for me, that makes me good at my job because I can explain it to a 16-year-old.
Which, by the way, it takes a massive amount of intelligence. Like that whole process that you could even like lay that out. I remember someone called me, this is back when I was interviewing like Noam Chomsky and all these people. They called me a translator. They're like, comedy, you're translating, which takes such intellectualism to be able to, oh, how can I communicate this to the masses? Anybody can,
that's I think my job is
memorize a bunch of academic shit and then just shout it out at you, right? It actually takes much more intelligence to be able to make it funny, digestible, tangible to both a high school student and, you know, Eric Weinstein, whatever. But yeah, because even when I was hanging out with all the writers from The Nation, I never spoke up about like political things. I would just occasionally make a dick joke and everyone would be like, yeah, Jamie, we got a funny friend. And like, that was it. But man, it's like, we are going to help so much more people by being able to break these issues down. Right.
Yeah.
So I start getting invited to all these like atheist conventions. Like I opened for Richard Dawkins. I opened for Christopher Hitchens at the Sydney Opera House, dude.
Wow.
And you know, I'm talking about gay rights, and I'm not, but I'm also like, yeah, God's a homophobe, fuck him. Like I said that on TV. I spoke at that first really big atheist, the Reason rally, the like 30 to 50,000 people at the mall in Washington. It was like it was me, Bad Religion, Eddie Izzard, Dawkins, like it was crazy. And I remember when I did that, it was right when Trayvon Martin was killed. And I saw, 30 to 50,000 of us, a lot of white people. And then I saw like a protest of like 100 people for Trayvon a couple blocks away. And, we were just kind of celebrating and we're like, religious people are dumb. And then I remember I just like left the fancy catered backstage and I walked to the Trayvon rally and just like real tears, a real cause.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck. And I remember I ended up changing my speech that I gave, and I was doing great. I mean, I'm just crushing in front of fucking 30,000 people. It's a bananas feeling. Oh. And then where I lost a couple, but still got a lot of applause breaks, is I wrote something. It was a more clever, poetic version of, I would rather hang out with a Christian who wants to feed the poor than an atheist who's just going to bitch on Reddit making fun of people, right?
Okay.
So even back then, that's how I was thinking.
Yeah, you're still kind of the same guy through all this stuff.
That's the thing. That's why I never question myself like, oh, is this just politically advantageous? No, it's done nothing advantageous for me or my career. And so I would call myself an agnostic, blah, blah, blah. Over COVID, it was the first time I was ever single. I had a breakup. My cat died, and then COVID happened, and I was like sick. And so Valentine's Day was coming up, and I decided that I hadn't done mushrooms forever. And I was like, I'm going to do mushrooms by myself on Valentine's Day. And everyone was like, that is the worst idea. And I was like, I just felt so good about this idea. And I did it, and it was incredible. All of my goals, all of, everything I wrote down, nothing was about God. It was about relationships. It was about what I'm supposed to do with my life, all this stuff. And I remember I got to say this on the Ram Dass podcast. I put a Ram Dass. I've never heard of Ram Dass, but I was like, who is supposedly like calming? I was like, oh, that Ram Dass guy. And so I just put a YouTube or a documentary on. And I remember having all of these moments where like my ex, my heroes are all just like coming into my arms, and I'm hugging and I'm forgiving and I'm apologizing and all this stuff. And for people who were like, oh, you were alone on Valentine's Day, I was like, I was with everyone, I wasn't alone. And suddenly during the Ram Dass documentary, there are just moments in mushrooms where you don't realize you're gone, and then something brings you back and you're just like Inception, like, well, what the hell. A meditation bell hit on the Ram Dass documentary, and he started saying, be here now. And suddenly I realized that I don't know how long I was on my knees in front of the mountains with my arms open, just saying, I am open, I am open. And in my head, I was like, I guess I'm open to God. So that helped, but I didn't even think about Jesus. He was like last on my list. I was kind of like, all right, well, I think most people do this after they've done mushrooms. They're like, well, it looks like we're spiritual now. And, I only pretty much read up on Hinduism, Buddhism, all the stuff from the East, all the stuff that could still be beneficial through a secular lens, mindfulness, meditation, being one with the earth, all this shit. Self-helpy, manifesty, sort of Joe Dispenza type stuff, which like isn't really spiritual, but like, ties into, hey, we're not just like static beings, whatever. And then the Jesus thing, it was actually C.S. Lewis I read. It was really cool. It wasn't
like Mere Christianity.
Mere Christianity, yeah. It wasn't during any of my rock bottoms that I found Jesus. It was, I decided to come back to Austin because I had an idea of how I could lead a life that would be far less financially stable, but like kind of do more good in the world. And then I started reading about Jesus. Then I started kind of reaching out to those friends that I was talking about who were Christian, but never pushed it on me. Were just always just really kind mentors and being like, hey, I'm kind of curious, and that lead me to this. And my entire trip driving back from DC to Austin, it just felt guided. And so then I didn't have a place to live in Austin. Do you know Duncan Trussell?
No. I mean, I know of him, but no, I never met him.
So Duncan called me. I'd opened for him before I left Austin, but I guess the Ram Dass guy told him I was going through some trouble and didn't know where I should go. And Duncan called me on the phone. And what's funny is me and Duncan hadn't hung out enough for me to like take this phone call as normal. So my biggest like interaction with Duncan was watching his cartoon on Netflix. What the hell is it called? It's so good. It was him and the dude who did Adventure Time. But I'm just picturing on the phone, I'm just picturing the little cartoon version of Duncan. And I literally pick up the phone, and like in the most Duncan Trussell, he's everything you want him to be, where he's just like, hey man, have you read Jonah and the Whale from the Bible? And I was like, is this Duncan Trussell? And he's like, listen, come to Austin. You're going to be like the Buddha. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so like, I'm just getting the signs like that. I was going to stay with this comedian I didn't know, but I was trying to be healthy, and it's kind of a party house. And suddenly this dude who I taught jujitsu to, he called me and he was like, hey man, me and my wife talked about it. Cause I, just told him on Instagram. He's like, are you coming back to Austin? He's like, we want you to stay with us. We have a guest room, and like, I know you're trying to be healthy, and maybe staying with a comedian isn't a good idea. And so I was like, okay. And like, I didn't even know his wife, who now is like a sister to me. And I go to stay there, and they just go, you want to come to church on Sunday? And I was like, yeah. And then I happened to walk into a church where their opening line every sermon is, we are just a bunch of imperfect people pursuing a perfect God. Sometimes they joke and go into more detail about it. They're like, if you're new to the church, you're going to learn soon that we are all screwed up. That's the same way at every church. We just kind of brag about it. And opening with the pastors just humbling themselves before us, before God. Then at the end of the sermon, when it comes to collection, they go, if you need money, take as much of you as you need from grocery. So both the things that I thought all churches were about, like greedy on one hand, and then judgy, just got dispelled right away. It took me a little while to get into. It was I'm like, oh, these are places I've made fun of. And then suddenly just something happened and I just let go. And then, I'm a Jesus dude.
Yeah, me too. It's weird to even say it. Like, to be like I think I told you there's some like
weird
messages or something, like no one would have rolled their eyes harder at the idea of being like a born again Christian. I like that line, the line, I think it's a C.S. Lewis line where he says like, church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints.
Ooh,
that's pretty good.
Jeez, yeah. Well, but your line, the rolled your eyes, you did say that to me. And that's when I was like, oh, me and this dude are going to be friends.
Yeah.
Because did you have this feeling? So when I was an atheist, or when I was a super liberal, all I wanted to do was debate people. I just like had my talking points locked and loaded, ready to be a contrarian piece of shit. And, you know, when the God delusion came out, I was like, okay, I have to memorize this. And I would like pick fights with religious people online. And don't get me wrong, there were times in the atheist community. I remember when Hurricane Katrina happened, I saw some tweet of someone. There was this old black woman and she's sobbing and she goes, God has a plan. And just some smug atheist was like, yeah, well, didn't God do that to you? And I was just like, oof, like, I don't want to be part of that. I was an atheist because I wanted to defend gay people, defend women, you know, all this stuff. And, but with this, and it's not, at first I was like, am I embarrassed? But it's come out of my mouth on Adam Carolla's show, who's an atheist, on Dr. Drew's show. My interview with Dr. Drew ended up being with him being like, I learned something from you today. I want to start praying for people more. And I was just like, okay. Like, so it's not that I'm embarrassed. I legitimately have no urge to debate anyone because I just feel forever different and better. And I can kind of explain it, but not really. And, you know, my brother will make jokes like, you know, his cat's sick. So he's like, hey, send prayers to that Jesus fella you're friends with now. Or he would even like, he would be like, praise Allah, like at the end of phone calls just to kind of fuck with me. And there's no part of me that gets, you know, or someone will be like, didn't you perform the Global Atheist Convention? I'm like, yeah, isn't that fucking crazy? But like not, I don't feel defensive. I don't feel, this is the only thing in my life where I'm like, whether things are good or bad or what, I just feel calm about it. And I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, I'm way more resolved and stuff like that. But you know, I have my own issues with people who advertise Christianity a lot, and then I'm judgmental. It's a problem of mine. You know, I try to live it out. I don't talk about it that much, but I try to live it out. And I don't know if you know Connor Moore. He runs like Politically Homeless, like that whole like concept.
Oh no, people have said we should be friends.
Yeah, he's actually moving to Austin soon. He'll probably.
So that sounds right. That adds
good
up.
Dude. But he's like he's an atheist, and when I told him, he's like just like shits on Christians a lot. And I mentioned something when we were hanging out in Colorado, like that. Actually, Christian's like, what? He's like, really? He's like, oh. He's like, I just thought you were a good dude. And it's like, well, yeah, but this is how. Like, well, like I'm not doing this on my own. Like, this isn't. I'm doing this through something. You know, like that's like an important. Do you remember when there was that shooting in South Carolina at like a black church?
Yeah.
It was crazy because the kid who got like I think got the death penalty or something. Everyone who was the family of the victims got to speak to him.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh my God! And they're like, "We forgive you. God forgives you." Like, what? Someone kills my kid? Like, and I was like, "Oh my!" Like modeling the behavior is what's so powerful to me. But I do want to just quickly go into.
Hold on, I gotta compliment you first, because you did the same thing you did with the feeling dumb, where it started off as like, this is a bad thing about me, and it's actually this really beautiful thing about you.
Oh, like a humble brag?
Well, no, not even that. See, even that you turned into a negative thing. No, you legitimately do a good thing. Shut the fuck up and let me compliment you. a couple of the people who helped lead me to Jesus, like that mentor I told you about, his name is Brian. He's a jiu-jitsu coach in Austin. They, they were with me when I was suicidal, and he was like, man, I'm sorry I think the term in Christianity is like I wasn't a better witness or something, but he's like, I'm sorry I wasn't, I didn't talk about Jesus like more or whatever. And I was like, no. If you did, especially when I was suicidal and still considering myself agnostic or whatever, if you were like, hey, you know what's really going to help you? Jesus, I'd be like, I would walk out. And I've I have a friend. So this is the longest I've been purposefully celibate, which means I'm getting hit on more than ever, which means I'm saying no a lot. And it's been really hard. And it's made me
Literally.
almost want to. Yeah, exactly. And I've never been a porn guy, but it's made me want to look at porn more because I'm like, well, that's better than fucking this girl I could fuck. And so one of my buddies who I love, but he's like, he just goes, hey man, I know how to stop you from watching porn. And I go, how? And he goes, you're going to love this. And I go, okay, what do I do? He's like, every time you want to watch porn, instead read your Bible. And I was like, buddy, that is the worst idea I've ever heard of. First of all, I don't want to read the Bible while horny. That seems like a conflict of interest. That seems very weird. So like the fact that these Christians weren't like doing shit like that, what ended up happening was when I found him on my own, I like did this little mental Rolodex of, like you said, quote unquote, good dudes, where I was like, oh, fuck. Actually, all of the Christians I know are the most wonderful, forgiving, kind people. And they didn't push it on me. And so then I got to go to them and be like, hey, can I ask you a question? So just like us being translators, that's very much even my pastor, because I remember when I got baptized, I was like, I stopped doing shows and I was just going out to feed the homeless every day. I like kind of went broke again. And not that I could be like a Christian comic, but I'm like, fuck, I talk about sex so much. And he goes, hey, keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you are going to bring so many more people. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep cursing. Keep being, the church is just taking me in so hard, man. I have such huge community there, and it's me as I am. It's not me trying to be what I think a Christian is. So anyway, I think me and you will actually help a lot more people, just like politically, by not turning into some preachy fucking Jesus is the only way guy. Just be a good dude.
Yeah. And kind of modeling that. I do want to, I'm gonna have to go to teach at some point, but but I do want to talk about real quick, the link between psychedelics and Christianity is something very interesting to me. And essentially here's why is, I was trying to figure out the world, right? And so I was like, I guess I'm agnostic. And then I was like, am I an atheist? And I remember hearing like Faraz Sahabi, like the MMA coach,
he's great,
talking about, he's awesome. And he was talking about like kind of the same way that Sam Harris talks about it, but just in a cool way, about like billiard balls. And because Sam Harris doesn't believe in free will, right? And I think that kind of aligns. If you're going to be an atheist, to say like free will doesn't, we're just chemicals, we're just electrical energy, blah, blah, blah. And we don't really have a say in the matter. But I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. So I'm just agnostic. So there is some sort of spiritual thing out there, but what, I don't know, virgin birth all seems kind of silly. And then because parents and students and stuff, hypothetically, if I would partake in something that would change reality, like a psychedelic, then what is possible? I mean, I think it was actually Rogan was talking about one time about how Richard Dawkins has never had a psychedelic experience.
Ooh, so interesting.
When he says like, oh, well, that's impossible that you could see a double helix DNA pattern on DMT. It's like, hold on, you don't know what's possible. Like you have to recognize that you can change up to down in a very real way. And then that opens up your mind to people like me. I was very logical. I was very much like, this is possible. This is not, this is scientific truth, blah, blah, blah. And then if something changes where I go, actually, I don't know what the hell is going on. Maybe my lettuce is alive. I don't know. Like that kind of stuff. Then I go, well, then who's to say that it couldn't be a virgin birth? Or who's to say that a Red Sea couldn't be parted? What? I am so confident that if I know what's possible or not, is could psychedelics be used as a way to break down in a closed mind what is possible, and then with that opening, that crack, the idea of Christ and the miracles and everything could come in, because it's a weird, the Venn diagram's very small, Jamie. I'm trying to find like pastors that are also like doing work with MAPS, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. There's not many.
Yo, I'm gonna ask my pastors about this. I'm very curious. And there's a really cool pastor I've become friends with. So me and that band Under Oath, one of the guys from Under Oath, and we're doing this like music spoken word project. Okay. And so they brought me to their church, and their pastor is just cool as shit. I'm gonna text him about this. It's really interesting.
You see where I'm getting at? Like, could it be used as a tool to bring people to be open-minded enough to just crack their Bible and look at it with a sincere curiosity and open mind?
This is gonna get turned into someone's gonna clip this and be like, two centrists try to drug people into Christianity. I will. Yeah, exactly. I will tie it to everything we've talked about. I have a podcast. I'm a fucking professional. I know how to wrap this up. I think that anything that enables you to open your mind to a new reality, because this is the first time that I realized, oh, you know what? I did have that psychedelic trip before I made all those conservative friends. I was just thinking about the God stuff, but like that could have been the crack for that as well. Taking mushrooms. And then this was during COVID. So I was in like the mountains of Arizona. So that was the first time I was kind of around more conservative people. And I still considered myself very liberal. I didn't have any conservative books back then. It was just spiritual. And again, the thing that got me through all of my drama was that I promised myself I would never get bitter, either bitter towards women or bitter towards the like I'm like, I just can't. I can't. It will destroy me. I was already fragile enough and suicidal enough. I couldn't add rage, Yeah. And so I think that when you do something that opens your mind to the possibility of just love, my life was really bad then, and I felt nothing but love. I think that could open you up to Jesus, to God. I think that could open you up to being kinder. I think being kinder could open you up to being more open-minded. I think being more open-minded can open you up to changing your belief. I think once you see that you can change one belief, you can change other beliefs. I think most of us, our gut, our subconscious knows the right thing to do. We know the girl we're supposed to break up with. We know the dream we're supposed to be pursuing. We know the God we're supposed to be looking to. But then all of our programming, this kind of worldly programming or whatever, is just kind of telling you the opposite. Hey, be selfish, be about you, fuck these other people, don't listen to that tribe. Christianity is a fucking cult, all this stuff. And it's those defense mechanisms. It's what pushed me away from you for a millisecond before I was like, what are you doing, man? This dude should be your friend. And anything that can quiet those voices, and by the way, you can't just, I went to some fucking influencer party that I performed at the other day, and people were taking shots with mushrooms, and I'm like, not how you do it. I'm talking about, if you're going to do something like this, you want intentions. They talk about set and setting. You want to be meditating afterwards, journaling, all this stuff. Like, I don't do drugs to do drugs. And actually I was thinking about doing mushrooms again recently because I'm like, oh, I haven't done it in a couple years. It changed my life. And I was like, I'm not, and I've had plenty of opportunities. I don't want to do it unless it can do something for me. And these are the kind of things that I think that you can get out of it, but you can't just be trying to like party. But so yes, I think yes, but I think framing it as it can open your mind to a lot of really healthy, cool things that maybe you never thought you would be open to.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you. We did, like an hour and 15. This was great, man. I appreciate you kind of opening up. You were sharing some stuff that, I know that you kind of, as a comedian, you kind of bleed out on stage, like just like put yourself out there. But, to show that kind of vulnerability, to talk about like dark times and the ways that you've like screwed up. I think
Thanks,
that's,
Well,
that's I think part of the courage that it took for you to be like, you know what, I'm not gonna just stick to my guns and stick to this mentality that's essentially killing me. I gotta look for something new. I gotta branch out. So I really appreciate you coming on here, and I hope this is the first of many conversations that we had together, because we didn't even get into jiu-jitsu or anything. All the
I
stuff
know, dude. No, we got to talk more. And I will say that, like, that was another Jesus thing for me. Like, I always thought best case scenario, I just be a good man and people will forget about my past. And it wasn't until meeting Christians that they were like, no, 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 no. You talking about it and talking about what you went through is actually what's gonna help people. And so yeah, if any of you guys did like me, I'm taking a little social media break. I mean, you can still follow me on Instagram, please.
So just ask for your where can people follow you?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at the Jamie Kilstein. I believe I'm shadow banned, which is one of the reasons I'm taking a break, besides my mental health. It's the worst. And but I have a podcast. I have a new mental health comedy podcast, which you should come on. It's called Advice Not Taken. We're only like 15 episodes in, so you can still be an OG. But like, yeah, Dr. Drew's done it, Tim Kennedy's done it, and then I just talk about mental health and self-help from a place of I'm in it with you guys, not sort of like this is what you do, and if you don't, you know, you're soft or whatever. So yeah, it's called Advice Not Taken. You can go to jamiekilsteinpodcast.com. I'm also doing stand-up tours. Yeah, opening for Corolla, JP Sears, Dave Landau. I think I'm gonna open for too, doing some headlining stuff. That's all at jamiekilstein.com/tour.
Beautiful. Cool. Jamie Kilstein, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. I'll talk soon.